You are live, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. This is the Camden Select Board meeting for January 11th, 2022. It is the deferred meeting from January 4th, which we postponed till today. This meeting is a hybrid meeting. You have the ability to connect via Zoom if you like, and the link for that is on the town website for this meeting, and to click on that to join as an attendee. Alternatively, we are broadcasting on YouTube also, and the instructions for a phone connection are also on the agenda for anybody who wants to connect that way. It doesn't have the electronic means for a camera. We request that any attendee has a question or a comment to please raise your hand. That's what we'll be monitoring. We'll try to get to all of them if we can. And we can bring you on to make a comment or ask a question. So please we've tried to give the people who are here live and the people who are on Zoom the same privileges and no more, no less. So with that, we'll go into our agenda, which the first item is any public input on non-agenda items. Does anyone here have a public input on non-agenda item? Not seeing any. I do have one submission that was sent to me from Nina Holland, and she had two comments she respectfully requested that I read because she couldn't make the meeting. The first is, and I quote, "Communication with the community could be improved. Many citizens do not follow the Town of Camden online page or see occasional Facebook postings. The exception is contentious issues such as the dam. My suggestion is that one select board member work on the problem, for instance, at no cost. Upcoming meetings of the board and committees open to the public may be in the newspapers on a regular basis, perhaps under calendar events or similar space. I especially think the free press is important because not everyone can afford or is interested in the Camden Herald or the Courier Gazette." The second comment she made, which really relates to an agenda item, but I'll read it anyway, and I quote, A second thought is to hold off on the request from Snowball for funds to fix the grading equipment until the problem can be evaluated. Discussion about climate change, the environmental energy impact of running snowmaking, and future financial costs to taxpayers of managing the skiing enterprise will affect taxpayers. Consider the cost of staff, equipment, and impact on the environment. Please take time to evaluate the requests before acting. Thank you for your attention. End of quote, again from Nina Holland of Camden. And with that, we'll move on to our second item, which would be a request to approval or comment on the board meetings from our meeting on December 14th. Any comments from anybody on corrections? Matt, Mark? I
have no comments or corrections this week.
Okay, how about a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Allison made the motion.
Anybody else have any comments?
No.
I second.
Motion made and second. Discussion. Not hearing it. All those in favor, and by the way, just before we vote, sorry, the people on Zoom are going to require a verbal. So all those in favor, 3. Mark?
Aye.
Matt?
Matt Siegel, aye.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Now we would head into our item 3, which is action items. The first of which is the request from the Camden Public Library to close Atlantic Avenue on Saturday, February 5th, 2022, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. for Winter Fest activities. This was a request directly from the library. Anybody have any comment, Mark?
I'll make a motion that we approve the request from the Camden Public Library to close Atlantic Avenue on Saturday, February 5th, 2022, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. for Winterfest activities.
And I will second Mr. Ratner's motion.
Motion made and second. Discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor here? 3. And Mark?
Aye.
Matt?
Matt Siegel, aye.
5-0. Thank you very much. On to item B on actions. It will be approval of the revocable license agreement for Mauricio, Botero, Velez, and Osvaldo Manzon at 153 Chestnut Street for underground power. You see in the packet comments from anybody, questions from anybody on this license? So we've had a similar one just a couple of weeks ago.
We did, yeah. So it's very similar to the other underground power revocable license agreements. It's reviewed by both the Public Works Director and it was prepared by Bill Kelly. So.
Okay. Any other comments? Mark?
I'd be glad to make a motion to approve the revocable license agreement for Mauricio, Botero, Velez, and Osvaldo Manzon at 153 Chestnut Street for underground power, and I apologize for any mispronunciation.
I'm used to it for my own name. Do I have a second?
I will second Mr. Ratner's motion.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Oh, Allison.
Is there any fee associated with,
No, we don't have a fee structure in place yet.
is that something we can,
Look at.
yeah, just, I mean, not that we want to discourage it, but just for the cost of the administrative
Sure. Sure.
time and.
Yeah, that's something that is part of the fee order we were going to bring back because, with really all of our right-of-way
Yeah.
licenses,
Yeah.
permits, whatever, they take up a great deal of time and we don't charge any fees for them. So I think that's a whole
I would agree.
suite of fees that we need to propose to the select
We
board.
mentioned a few others.
Right, I
already.
just didn't want to forget.
I think it's a good idea. Matter of fact, I'll make a note of it before I forget.
And is there a time frame attached to this revocable agreement? Because I'm just thinking the ground is frozen right now, so is it?
Oh, for when they have to
yeah,
install it?
Do they have like a certain period of time or?
No, usually it's,
So until,
You actually can excavate frozen ground. It's just not fun.
it's not fun. Okay. Good luck. Okay.
Okay. We have a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor? 3. Mark?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye, thank you.
Okay, 5-0. Thank you very much. To the next item, which is the approval of a release and termination of the letter of credit from Cynthia Reed Revocable Trust of the American Boathouse.
So to give a little bit of background on this, as part of the development agreement that was brought before town meeting in 2017, there was a requirement that a letter of credit, the select board approved and entered into the letter of credit with the Reeds for this project. And one aspect of it is once the project was completed to the satisfaction of the town and ultimately the select board, that the select board would have the authority to release the Reeds from the letter of credit. And the building's been inspected and signed off by the code enforcement officer, planning and development director, and any impacts to the right-of-way were inspected by the public works director. And they were great there were a few changes that were asked for, and they made them and, ready for the project to be closed and the letter of credit to be revoked.
Wasn't the original intent of these dollars to ensure there would be, the historical look of the building would be identical, or basically identical to what it was before?
I think it was just general project completion and the historic preservation of the building in its, original state was part of the whole
Which
agreement.
they actually compliment, they actually did a very good job. They used the same windows that were before, the same door, and they made it better, but they really didn't change the facade one bit. The grounds, yes. Not the facade.
Bob,
Mark?
over here.
Yeah, you're over there.
All right, I remember the original agreement, because it's a historical property, they had to keep the original outline and design of the outside of the building, and then they could do their rework in the inside. And just if you spend any time looking at the building, they've done an exceptional job.
Yep.
It looks great, and it preserved, if you remember the condition of the boathouse before the Reeds took it over, it was in abysmal shape and it could have fallen down at any time. They've really done a wonderful thing to preserve a part of our harbor, and I'm very appreciative of the work they put into it.
Yes.
I agree.
Any other comments? Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the release and termination of the letter of credit from Cynthia Reed Revocable Trust for the American Boathouse.
And I will second Mr. Ratner's motion to release and terminate the letter of credit from Cynthia Reed.
Thank you. Motion made and second. Discussion? Not hearing anything. All those in favor, the three of us? Three. Mark?
Aye.
Matt?
Matt Siegel, aye.
5-0. Thank you very much. The next item is the authorization to spend up to $55,000 from the Snowball General Fund Reserve account to repair a 400 grooming machine track. I'm not sure what the 400 means, but Audra, why don't you give us a little background if you like?
Yep, so the 400 is the type of grooming
That's
machine.
what I figured it was, yeah.
I believe we have three, is it two 400s and a 600?
600, 400, and 200.
What Rochelle said, so 600.
Model numbers, yeah.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah,
Oh, I bet the 600 is bigger.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
600 is bigger. So this machine, unfortunately, the track needed repairs. It's an expensive repair. It's an expensive piece of equipment. These machines are regularly serviced, but it's sort of an unavoidable, issue. And really, it's something that we didn't have a choice on. We needed to make this repair because it was necessary to continue to operate the Snowball for the season. So we had to, we had to go ahead and just purchase the track because we would have been out of commission for the beginning of the season, particularly around the Christmas holiday, if we didn't do this repair. So really, this is just you ratifying it and approving it to be expended from the reserve account in the general fund, which is different than the surplus account that's part of the Snowball special revenue fund.
Which is just to be clear, the latter you just mentioned was what the revenue excess over cost was in the past few years.
Correct.
Right. That's semantics gets confusing. The general fund reserve is in the town's general fund, and it's monies that we and the taxpayers put aside about $25,000 a year for a couple of years, and that's the fund. So here, just to be clear, the $55,000 you're requesting to come from the general fund reserve balance, and that will leave how much in that?
So it'll actually be in deficit by about 5,000.
Okay,
So there's
okay,
50 in it
okay,
currently.
Okay, all right. And just to be clear, also, on the money was spent for the, well, unfortunately, the compressor situation, which required us to go out of state, as I understand it, to get these compressors because they weren't available here. It cost more money than we usually spend. That's coming out of
That is the surplus
of
that'll
the-
be hit by that.
The Snowball surplus fund.
Yes, and the way that works is that we've had to over expend that particular budget line.
Yeah.
Because it was 42,000 more than what was budgeted, and a lot of that was just a function of demand this year for that type of equipment.
The compressor line item, we went over because of this problem getting from Buffalo, New York.
Yes.
And so the balance of it, we're taking out of the surplus in the Snowball budget, which was, again, is the excess of profit over expenses for the last few years.
Correct.
Okay.
And there's still 41,000 remaining
In the
Snowball surplus for
And-
the Snowball Special Revenue
And
Fund.
as your accounting suggests here also, we've already taken out, which was approved by the board, almost 35,000 from, which account did that come out of? That came out also out of the general fund or the surplus?
Surplus for the Tubing Hill.
Okay.
So when you say general fund, that's the Snowball general fund?
No.
No, the town general fund.
Every year, well, we've always been struggling with, trying to, balance this Snowball thing against some of its trials and
An
tribulations.
unassigned fund balance of the town?
It's-
No, the town has
no.
a
We have a
reserve
special
account
account.
specifically for the Snowball.
We specifically
Oh, okay.
allocated in the town budget about $25,000 a year for a
Right.
number of years. We put into a general fund reserve. And
Okay, yeah,
that's where the
for the
money.
Snowball.
For the Snowball only.
Right.
And that's where the money, that's where the 55,000 is recommended to be there from.
Which already has a negative balance?
No.
No, it's got a
We all
balance.
have a negative balance.
It's a balance of 50 to date.
There is a line item in the Snowball budget for compressors. That one, because the extra higher cost than we expected,
Okay.
we went over that one. So the delta of that expenditure, that will come out of the Snowball surplus in that account.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, how much is coming out of the town general, the Snowball general,
55.
and how much is in there?
50.
50.
50.
We'll be -5 going into budgeting season.
Why,
I mean, what else, I mean, there's,
The alternative, I suppose we could take
why don't we take 5 from
5,000 more
select
out
board
of the,
contingency? I mean, it's
surplus.
going to have to be funded from somewhere.
I wouldn't worry about, we've done this before. We did this recently with, I forget what piece of equipment it was. Really, this is just in an effort for Jody and I to have a true
Or to
record.
keep track of- right, right, okay, yeah,
Because,
that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
there was a point where we were spreading expenses across multiple accounts, but it becomes more difficult to track the history
Nobody
of
knows
what
how
we
much things
spent.
cost over the years.
and we,
That's-
and we can reconcile at the end of the snowball season
There's no good
anyway.
trail. There's no good trail. I agree with you on the county basis. So it's either take the whole 55 out of one or 55 out of the other.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, lots of sense.
And 5,000 is fine. I mean, we can reconcile at the end
I'm
of
not worried
the,
about-
no,
I'm not
and
worried.
then we
I'm
can
working-
reconcile at the end of the snowball
Obviously,
season.
we
It'll be
need
fine,
to,
because it's cash
but we
accounting
generally,
anyway, so.
we just generally need, all of us, we are concerned with the tracking of, expenses. The compressor is a good example. That was
People
something.
oftentimes say that they have a hard time hearing you. I don't know.
But the money for the compressors was unanticipated because of the situation in the market right now, and we couldn't get our normal. I think we own one and rent three. We rent three, and we had to get those 3 from Buffalo because two. Okay, the normal was quite a bit more than obviously we normally budget. Is related to the market today in a sense.
Well, it's a function of the construction industry. There's, construction hasn't stopped. Like major projects have continued over the winter, and that's put a lot of strain on rental of that sort of equipment.
I mean, fundamentally, all it does is it puts more strain on monitoring the Snowball budget for this
For
fiscal
the
year.
rest of the season, yeah. Don't
Yes.
break anything.
Any questions, Mark or Matt?
I did have a question. We had talked about the need, we're going to need to purchase a new groomer, and we put it off, I believe. Is this the groomer that was going to be replaced?
No.
No, the one that would be replaced is, I believe, the 600 with another 400?
Just the 600.
Well, that should-
Would it be replaced with another?
Another 600.
Oh, another
It's
600.
a different machine, Mark.
Okay, good. Then we're
Matt?
fixing a machine we're going to be using for a while.
Right. Matt, any questions?
No, thank you.
Anybody else, any questions? Or do I have
How's
a,
it going over there, with the,
sure,
I would, but I don't know.
sure.
I'm not in charge, so.
No, that's,
With the,
Neither am I.
the magic carpet in a new place and,
Yeah, hi.
Food.
right, yeah.
So,
introduce
Sure,
yourselves.
Beth
please.
Ward, Snowball Mountain Manager, General Manager. Rochelle Gagney, Mountain Manager.
That name's familiar.
Yeah. So the season has started like a bang. We were really busy over Christmas break. We were able to move the conveyor lift over to the right side of the mountain, if you're looking up the mountain. It's a bit tight. We still have some kinks we want to work out over there. And when it's really busy, some parents like to be in boots teaching little tiny people, and that can like really take up a lot of space. So we're working on those details. The tubing hill, we were not able to install the Mighty Might lift this fall because the design didn't get to us till late November. And then it was cold and we needed to put in cement and things like that. So hopefully in the spring we can jump right on that. But we are creating the tubing hill for walking public like we used to do. So that's close to being, there's plenty of snow over there. We just have to build the berms and do the things that we need to do to get it open. But
So that'll be up and running this year?
yep, at some
Oh,
point.
that's so
Yep.
great.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. But we're really working on getting the top. They're making snow like you read about right now, thank goodness. And we're down, the other groomer had a hose go, so we're waiting for a part for that. So thank goodness we do have the 400, because we would have been really bad off if we didn't get those tracks when we got them, so. I do have a question for the board, though. Toboggan weekend is February 12th is the Saturday. We didn't know if the board wanted to compete against Rockport again this year.
I'm getting tired of beating them. Sorry.
I would have to say absolutely.
Okay, great.
I don't know who else would do it with me, but I'm there.
Okay, Mark, if you're going, how can I say no?
There you go.
Great,
Actually,
great.
Matt, it's actually quite easy, but
What do you all say?
It's just a few seconds of sheer terror, words to avoid.
about 10 seconds, yeah. But yes, but why not?
Good, okay,
That's
great.
February 11th, you
Well,
said?
is the Saturday, yep.
Okay. We go first.
You go first?
No, I mean, we're the first event.
Yes.
The match race is the first event.
Is it? No, I don't.
Usually you go at noon,
No, yeah, I'd
It
rather
was-
not do.
don't you? Right before the parade.
That's
Yes,
right.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
You don't want to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning or
Oh,
something.
no. It's right after the parade. First event after the parade. We digress.
Are we going
But-
to judge the parade? Wasn't that a big?
Oh, Beth wouldn't let us do it.
Alison and I will take care of the parade.
Oh, okay. I'll let Holly know. She is looking for a group to
Looking to start
to
fighting.
judge the parade, for sure.
Yes,
For a group.
yes. You heard the gang. We'll
True, and there was a time before it wasn't taken very seriously.
we'll name the four at a later date.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Beth.
Anything
Thank
else
you,
for us? No,
Michelle.
we're good?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Earlier for the select board, if I'd known, I was judging the parade.
Well, it's actually, I forgot, it was a little bit of a controversial thing
It
last
was
year.
very controversial.
I
Sure, the year before.
don't remember when that privilege got taken away from the select board, but now that Holly was mentioned, I do remember there was,
I think we need a motion, or do we already make one?
So we need a motion?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So yeah, we're back to $55,000 for some track.
From the Snowball General Fund Reserve.
that's a confusing name.
I'll make a
I know it is.
I don't, yeah.
motion that we authorize to spend up to $55,000 from the Snowball General Fund Reserve account to repair a 400 grooming machine track.
It'd be the general fund Snowball Reserve.
Yes.
Well, this is the same confusion that occurs when people,
This is the hierarchy, it's the general fund and then Snowball.
no, Snowball is completely separate from the general fund.
No, this is, I'm asking you to take
I
it
know.
out of the general.
I'm just trying to explain that the surplus that is in the Snowball budget is a completely separate set of accounting. It has nothing to do with the town's budget.
But I'm asking you to take it out of the
It's going
town's
to be
budget.
taken out of the town's.
Okay.
So it's the general.
Why don't I reword that to say authorization to spend up to $55,000 from the general fund reserve account to repair a 400 grooming machine track? So
General
that there's
fund
no
Snowball
confusion of
Reserve.
where the money is coming from.
That's, Mark, you should specify, the Snowball General Fund Reserve is a specific line item in the town budget. That's why it's worded that way. It's just, remember, the general fund of the town is separate from the budget of the Snowball. I thought that's what you were.
I understand. There
believe
seemed
that
to be some
general fund should be
confusion about where
first.
the money was coming from.
I think there clearly is a little bit of confusion, but you would say general fund and then Snowball, because the Snowball Reserve is a line in the general fund budget.
Next time I will put the account number
Thank you.
in the motion.
Thank you. And that's, the confusion reigns too, that's the general fund is where the monies come from for the $154,000 loan payment for the,
Also that, but that's a different line.
it's a different line. Yep.
Okay, so I second this motion.
Yes, please.
I did. I second.
Oh, good. Second, motion made and seconded. Further discussion or questions or confusion? Okay, roll call, no. All those in favor? 3, Mark?
Aye.
Matt?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. The last item we have on actions is appointing a director to the board of the Midcoast Internet Development Corporation. Basically, Matt had to pull off of that position because of so much on his plate, and we currently need the Camden representative for MIDC. Audra, do you want to make any comment on that, or should I?
I believe Matt has a presentation.
It's
That's part of
it's
this.
going to affect who we pick for
I think so,
director?
yeah, I think
Okay.
we should know a little.
All right. All right, Matt, you want to go?
Absolutely. If it's works for you guys, I'll try and make this.
Fine.
What are you giving me, Bob? 5 minutes?
4.5.
I think as long as it takes us to understand.
Just get her done, Mac. Just get it done. Well, don't worry about time right now. Just get her done.
Yeah, hold on 1 second.
Yeah,
We're going to do a screen share. Give me a second.
Yep. It's right under,
Please.
yep.
Okay, 1 moment, please.
Yep.
Okay.
It's coming up, Matt.
1 second, everybody. There we go. All right, Bob, that should give you pretty much a full screen.
Maybe if you just tap the green full screen icon, it'll,
Hold on 1 second.
That worked.
Yep. That's one.
I got the back of somebody's head. What the hell
I'm
is that?
sorry, it could be this one.
That's Mark.
there we go.
That should work. So Allison, you should have at that point a screen of the Midcoast Internet.
No.
We
We've
got
got
We
the,
had it.
We got the agenda.
We have the agenda. That's not what we want to know. 1 minute, please.
You had it before.
sorry, I just should have been a piece with the,
Oh, sorry, wrong one. That would be user error, folks. That is not anything else. But watch how that one
There
works.
you go.
perfect, sort of.
That should be good. So good evening, everyone. I thought I would spend a couple of minutes just going through Midcoast Internet, just to bring everyone up to speed. Allison, we had discussed this before. I'm going to go through, I think, Sophie, the idea would be just to stop me if there's something you want me to go back on. But let me get started here. And let's just talk a little bit of broadband for 1 second. I assume, without question, that you all know what broadband is. I'm seeing nods. And this idea that our community needs this service, this idea of high-speed data transmission. It comes in various shapes and sizes, Bob. We've talked about this. The specifics in terms of what is broadband would be a whole discussion unto itself. In our case, we're dealing with something called fiber optic, okay, as opposed to any kind of satellite or wireless. Taking a look here, Audra, we've discussed throughout the last year why we're doing fiber, why now, and the talking points, Sophie, Bob, you and I have talked about this. The list is on the left here. The idea of telehealth, education, working from home, communication, small business needs, leisure entertainment, economic development, and one more, this idea of equity, social and digital equity. As I said, stop me if you want, but I'm going to keep going. Now, a quick description of Midcoast Internet, again, as a fiber optic solution, the idea that it's better and faster. But on the right side, you can see there are a number of key elements in this particular municipal utility. It is a nonprofit regional municipal utility. A key takeaway from tonight would be the idea that there's community ownership of the assets once this utility is up and running. Another aspect that you want to consider is fiber to the home, the idea that we would be bringing high-speed connectivity to homes and businesses directly to them, as opposed to some of the other competing technologies out there. The other thing, again, just going through 4 more here, something called an open access network. And there's going to be not a quiz on this, but these are just the terms that you want to start to be able to understand if you have questions. The idea of an open access network. Next, this idea of universal access to all residents. This ties into the idea of equity, that you want your community members all to have access, whether they're rich or poor, whether they live close to downtown or in a more rural part of our community. And then 2 more here that you just want to take note of in terms of Midcoast Internet, the idea of speed. And that the service that would be provided by the utility is something called 250 over 250 up to 1 gig over 1 gig. This is something called symmetrical speed. And the final point, the takeaway, is the idea that there are no local taxes involved in this. So in brief, why is it better? It's fast, it's reliable, it's symmetrical, and it's affordable. For those of you who want specifics, as I said, not too much in this particular presentation, just the idea of speed, what it gets you. For those of you who are in entertainment, for a movie, you're looking at the current systems that we have in place are about 25. It'll take you about 22 minutes to download a movie. And in the proposed system, it would take you about 34 seconds. So again, just keeping that in mind, the idea of speed and how that would impact things like telemedicine. Here are some of the players. Well, when we talk about open access, there are about 4 players in the state. GWI, Pioneer. We would be working as a municipal utility with partners to provide service on this open access network. In terms of when you're asked as a select board member, is this something new? Is this something completely different? No, this is a trend throughout the country. The idea of community ownership, these municipal networks, something called the Institute for Local Self-Reliance keeps track on this. There are about 700 of these up and running at this point across the country. Here in Maine, in terms of what's up and going right now, Down East Broadband, Katahdin, Ellsworth, Sanford, Rockport, Ellsworth, and South Portland, we would be joining that group of wonderful folks. Here in Midcoast, you can see the circle on the right is the region of the initial region for the coalition. And when we move forward, as you'll be hearing in the years ahead, there's a Midcoast Internet Coalition, which is a partnership of 12 communities. And here they are. Camden, Cushing, Hope, Lincolnville, Owlshead, Rockport, Rockland, Thompson, South Thompson, and Union at this point is the core of that coalition. That is different than what we are discussing tonight. So, Bob, we are in Midcoast Internet Development Corporation. And that was formed, as you all know, back in June as a under interlocal agreement. The first board meeting, which Bob was kind enough to attend, was on December 13th. The members include Camden, Rockland, Rockport, and Thomaston. As you can see at this point, here's the list of officers, and the executive director is Deborah Hall, Vice President Denise Munger from Rockport, Reporting Secretary Greg Hamlin from Thomaston, Development Director Benjamin Dorr from Rockland, and the open seat which we are looking to fill this time would be from Camden. In conclusion, as we wrap this up in terms of an overview, as of this week, there is now a feasibility study which, Audrey, is this been brought to the town at this point? Do you have this in the office?
Yes, I just received a copy over the past couple of days, so I would propose to Bob, when we're doing agenda setting for the next meeting, which is next week, that that feasibility study be a discussion item.
And I would, that was where I was going, so thank you, that's perfect. So as we start to look at that feasibility study, I'm going to wrap up here with my last 2 minutes, just to talk about what that feasibility, what we should be looking for in that. Certain key elements. It is about a 50-page document that we have drafted and put together with Axiom Technologies. Each of these colorful circles represents the key elements in terms of a feasibility study. They are the green, build costs, in the red, Allison, income revenue, in the orange, Sophie, operation costs, and Mark, in the blue, the idea of 5-year pro forma financial statements. So that is what we are looking at in there. In terms of financial models, why are we putting together a feasibility study? Because you need money. And you need to get money, you need to make sure that you have a document that says that this project can be up and running. Who are you addressing? Mainly private investors at this point. Bob will be speaking to that more as this year progresses. But private investors, FAME, which is the Finance Authority of Maine, and the Maine Connectivity Authority, which is the new governing body, all coming together, we hope, to provide 25% seed money of the build costs. And in conclusion, what you're trying to do is create some kind of municipal hybrid in terms of financing that will then allow you in 2 or 3 years' time to put together a financial package for non-recourse municipal bonds of some kind, again, with no taxation.
Right, Matt, does...
Timetable, just to wrap it up.
No,
so here's the timetable that you are looking at. Voters approved the interlocal government agreement in June. During the summer, the boards approved funding for Axiom, so the study, as Audrey just said, is now available to us. In the fall, that study was completed, and we began looking at state and federal grant applications. December, as Bob was there, was the first board meeting, and now as we move forward in Q1 of 2022, there'll be studies, surveys, and pre-subscription rollouts. Also, proposals, pro formas, prospectus to investors for Q1 of 2022.
Matt, there's one ad that's rather hot off the wire. Literally yesterday's board meeting, they discussed the marketing program, and they did approve that as a, which we probably should by next the 18th.
Oh, you're
Sorry, let me repeat. There's a hot off the wire one. Yesterday we had they had a board meeting, and the board members approved it's about $10,500 for marketing program to create materials for the public to understand some of the things you've mentioned here in a more in layman's terms, literally, and to get that out. That's going to be kickoff probably next month. So that
Bob, to your point, I mean, the main push for so many of the things that we do in these communities are about marketing communications. And historically, it's one of the things that we do really, really badly in these small towns. So what we're trying to do in this case, as I was wrapping up my tenure, was just to make sure that there were materials available to build a marketing communications package.
Right. And I said it exists, and we can get that package also, Audra, for information for the board on the 18th. With that, I think that where we are, and Matt, you know this better than I do, I think the Midcoast Internet Development Corporation is at a very critical juncture. It's the next months will be relatively short number of months, the success or where it's heading will be defined from my perspective. And I think these are critical months from a corporate perspective, and from the director level, that's where the focus, the director level is not a Matt Siegel who's a genius in these areas technically and otherwise, but more a business, finance, marketing kind of things that any corporation should be running. And I think that one of the things I mentioned to Audra, I think these months are critical, and I would be happy for as an interim director, to take this role as a director, but as an interim basis, because as it grows, it's going to get absolutely huge, and I'm sure I won't have the time for it. But we're in the formulative stage, and I think whoever is picked needs to have a business background.
I agree.
Yeah,
I already have 17 questions on this business
the model
model.
is really, I mean, I come from Silicon Valley. It's a startup model, so you really need to be hitting hard at this point to get private investment, to get your seed money, to get this thing off the ground. We also are competing with great restrictions in terms of workforce availability and material costs at this point. So there's a certain, unlike many startups, there's a certain pressure to get that funding as quickly as possible to get this project moving.
So I have like 25 questions on this model, and I'm really curious about this. Number one, when we say that there's no associated tax, but we want to finance this with bonds, that means that it has an impact on our municipal budget.
Revenue bonds?
I see if we contract
So
a
again,
bond.
And they would be non-recourse, so they would not, it's an independent municipal entity. So the towns are not going to be, which is too bad, because it would be much easier to have the town's faith and credit behind an issue of a bond. That's not the way it would work with this particular model.
This corporation would be getting its own bonds.
Its own bonds, okay, so it would raise debt, basically.
Yep.
Okay.
So again, you're going to base it on revenue of a non-recourse bond is not going to be part of the finance model for at least 3 cycles, because you're going to need to be able to show to a potential, to the bond market, that you have generated, that you have a revenue generating corporation that's working.
So that's my second question. Is it making profits? Is it revenue generating? What are the similar corporations in the Midcoast, and what is their 10-year plus viability? Are they sustainable?
I don't know. I don't know about the Midcoast.
When I read this, Matt, I am number one, I'm very happy to read this, but I'm super worried.
You should be.
Worried.
You should be, because remember, as I said, my preface to a discussion about director, this is a very critical stage right now, and the pro formas, a small mistake now could be death.
Yeah.
And that's understood.
Sophie, I just want to agree with you. Yeah, the modeling, I have to be really careful in terms of personal opinion versus responsibility to the community. I will stick with Bob's statement that this is a critical junction. We have to be observant of any kind of financing structure that's taking place in this particular utility. You have to put a critical eye towards the pro formas and the realities of those and make sure that they're accurate. I think I want to hold there. Again, Bob, I don't know how far to go in terms of analysis.
Well, I mean, the critical juncture is also included. If funding isn't found through some of the major sources, not the least of which is federal and state funds, that's going to be a bellwether.
Well, I'd say that a lot of Sophie's, some of the questions you have now will be answered after looking at the feasibility study, but you're going to come away with it with new questions.
Yep.
And I think it's going to be very clear to everyone that there is a need for outside funding to make this pencil. It's not going to work just on the revenue that's generated by user take rates.
Nope. No, I think I think all the questions are good. I think they're the same questions I have, Sophie.
And
the same questions I have.
Right. And I'm also wondering, what is the cost of the...
Go back to that before we jump to the next question. Your debt service needs to be extremely low to make this work. So that means that, I mean, it has to be extremely low. And we'll go through the feasibility study in a greater detail, but just keeping that in mind, Sophie, I have the same concerns. You cannot launch this project unless your debt service is extremely low, because you are, in fact, relying on revenue from subscribers to pay off that debt service. But you are also, in this model, splitting that revenue between the ISP, the service provider, and the utility.
Right.
So again, your take is even smaller than in a private enterprise. So again, debt service has to be extremely low.
Right. I think any startup goes through the finance. It goes through that and that's where the critical questions have to be answered now. But I think Matt's right. I think if I'm only partially caught up on the feasibility study, but I think there's a lot of those questions that will be answered there, but others will be generated from it.
Yeah, like, I mean, also the maintenance cost. I mean, fiber is expensive. I mean, I'm all for fiber, and I'm really happy not to have to deal with copper. Great. Right. But
actually,
still, I mean,
fiber is not
who's...
expensive. I would have to take that one off the table. There are many things that are expensive. Installing it, really what the costs are, not the fiber, it's the installation costs, it's the labor.
Right.
Right, but
I mean, again, you're looking at about $50,000 per mile to build this thing. But those costs, that is, the vast majority of it is actually your labor costs.
These are all questions that have to be answered, and we just don't have them yet. So.
I'll wait to see the feasibility study, but...
Well, that's Audra's point. There's going to be more questions coming when you see the feasibility study. So but back to our action here, where Camden and Rockport, the two founding towns in this leadership in this event, only South Thomaston and Rockland are also just coming into the picture at the same time. So there's a lot of dynamics happening here, but they're all related to business development. All of them, finance, all that. It leads with that, but also the strategy, and then the funding sources is huge. If the funding sources don't occur, you don't have a business.
Yeah, that completely get.
And funding sources, and I'll just tag on to that, dovetail off of that, Sophie. It's not just the funding sources; it's also how you roll this out, and having designs that will allow you to generate, without having excessive costs, be able to do your initial builds. And again, we can discuss that once a study is in front of us. But again, you have to do it. It's a phased build. But even with that, to Bob's point, even in a phased build, you better have that funding lined up and your debt service low. And I go to the mat about that. That's huge.
And I'm also questioning, the $59.99, $95 a month. Is it affordable really for everyone in Camden or everyone in that coalition? I'm not, it might be competitive compared to what other services bring, but if we really have a social aspect of fairness and equity, is $59.95 or whatever, it was like $60 basically, affordable?
So yes, without going down that too much, I mean, the established national and, again, in terms of think tanks, that what we call digital equity, the price line is really at that $59.95/$60 point. That's based on the fact that at this point, the federal government is providing what used to be a $50 a month subsidy to lower income families. And that put it squarely, again, basically the subsidy. As of the latest rollout, that subsidy has been reduced to $30. But again, still nationally, that's considered kind of the sweet spot in terms of digital equity.
Yep. So with that, all good questions.
Allison, sorry, Allison.
I turn my back to you.
So could we review the sort of roles and responsibilities of the director that we're appointing? What power do they have or not have to commit Camden to things?
They have no power. They have no power to commit any no power to commit any town to anything. They only have they can obviously commit the Midcoast Internet Development Corporation to that entity to financial considerations, but not the towns.
And with the way that the MIDC has been set up, what kind of liability does Camden have for any associated outcomes? I heard that the comparison of Midcoast Solid Waste made a lot during that time,
right.
Which is concerning because Camden has a lot of liability.
It's a completely
there.
different structure.
Okay.
With Camden, well, believe me, I'm not going to sign. We are not going to sign Camden up to any liability. or Rockport, or Rockland. It's Midcoast Internet Development Corporation.
And now,
And also, I'd say that Bill can, Bill can speak to this because he helped a lot in the development of the corporate documents.
Right.
And that was a point that was gone over a lot amongst.
right, I mean, we talked about it at the time, but I'm just trying to
Remember?
remind ourselves,
Everybody.
right.
Well, and again, Allison, if I can jump in for 1 second, I mean, I think we should keep reminding ourselves of that. Again, it's a separate entity, and, you know, it was a non-starter, one, to have taxation to raise the mill rate, and two, to have the towns put their faith and credit behind this. I would not have gotten involved in the project if that was going to be the case. I thought that would put, you know, and Audra and I have talked about this, I thought that would have put the towns at extraordinary risk.
Yep.
We've seen models that have worked putting the town's faith and credit behind. Again, I was not willing to be a part of that. So don't drop that question, Allison, for a second, because that's a huge part of this endeavor, is that it needs to make it on its own without the faith and credit of these towns.
I mean, it's not necessarily a non-starter in the long run for it to be supported in some way by the
Sustainable.
town. There are a lot of, the wastewater department works fairly well. It's relatively well-established that municipal utilities are often very successful and well-run. So I'm not trying to, I really appreciate I really appreciate all the work that has gone into this and sort of your really broad knowledge. So I don't want, thanks for answering the questions, and I don't want it to be interpreted as like a,
Those are good questions.
No, Allison, I really appreciate the questions, and I would just, take it back to our initial conversation, the starter here. Should this go forward as planned, and there's financing and seed money, the town's responsibility is to be the marketer. We're going to have to be the poster children to promote subscription, because it is a revenue-based system. We don't put our faith in credit in terms of supporting this entity in terms of default, but we do put our might and our backing and our cheerleading capabilities and our marketing capabilities behind the necessity of getting town folk to be subscribers and to be the revenue stream for this if it is going to succeed. So again, we do have a certain amount of responsibility, just doesn't happen to be financial in the strictest sense of loans and guarantees.
Mark?
I want to mention a couple things here, a couple things that are important to know about this and to make sure that people remember is that, number one, the goal of this utility is to make sure that fiber gets to every residence in our towns. The commercial companies talk a good game, but they only want to go to the places that are easy and within their scope to do without really reaching some of the far-reaching places. That's why we don't have fiber all over the town right now. It's really important because it would support jobs and education and medical situations everywhere within our towns, at every location. That's one of the key things about why we do this, because we will be able to do fiber where no commercial company will do it, and at a cheaper price, which is important because we're not taking a profit out of it in the same way that the commercial companies do. I think that's really important. And saying that, I'd like to just make a motion that we appoint Bob to be our interim director for the Midcoast Internet Development Corporation.
And can we define interim before we second that? What are we defining as interim in terms of, is there a specific time period?
No, I don't want to put a drop dead date on it, but I'm talking a number of months, not years.
what are the terms?
What is what?
How long aren't there terms?
I don't believe there is a term, Matt.
It is a term.
Is there?
But
What is it?
Would you be filling the remainder of Matt's term?
What's the term, Matt?
3 years, no?
3 years. Yeah,
Well-
it's a 3-year term.
Well, I think, I just want the board to understand that if I do take it over, it's for this critical time period of about 4 to 6 months, and to see whether this thing goes or not. Now, if it's going well and it's chugging, I'm happy to keep going, but it's likely going to have a crosswalk to hit, yes, in that 4 to 6 month time period. That's what I call interim. And in the meantime, by the way, I say interim also because I think we should always have our eye open for somebody who's been there, done that, for this exact kind of a corporation too. And my business acumen is fine, but this is a separate entity. It's still a business. At the end of the day, still the same business principles apply. But we're going to know that and formulate that in the next 4 to 6 months. And that's why I call it interim. We don't have to call it interim because, as you did, Matt, you found out you couldn't continue, although you're continuing with other aspects of this operation, and you've done a phenomenal job to date, by the way, you and the whole team. But I think that's what we want to keep monitoring and keep this as an active issue in front of the select board as we monitor this thing going forward. To sit and say I'm doing it for 3 years, it might not be around in 6 months. It may be around in 60 years. I don't know. And, let's just take it one step at a time.
I think there's a tremendous amount of support for it, but I think having Bob watching it and looking at the business aspect of it, making sure that it's not just a wish, but that's a reality, I think is important to have somebody with feet grounded in a strong business sense.
And I would only dovetail off that to say critical eye, not just a passive eye, but a critical eye on what's going on.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Matt. Well, we can have more discussion. Do I have a second for the motion?
Second.
Second motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Matt, do you have anything else you want to add? Especially
I think
you.
we'll take it up, Audra, if it's okay with you, next week again, after folks have had a chance to review. I think we're going to have some hard-hitting questions that I will be in a better position after I talked a little bit with both you and Bob.
What are you suggesting exactly?
Oh, I think he's talking about the feasibility study.
Oh, sure.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah,
No,
that's fine. Okay.
Look over the feasibility study.
Absolutely. That's extremely important to bring the board up to speed a little bit more than you have. Even myself, I need to get up to speed on that also, but there's more business functions that I need to focus on, if so approved by the board. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Maybe this is a better question for next time, but has it been looked at, or is it going to be looked at, the viability of Camden doing it on our own? Are we sure that it, working with the other towns?
Yeah, so the way that it's structured, they look at each town that's part of the core four individually, and they, sort of outline what the cost of developing a network within each town is going to look like financially, and, in terms of projected take rates and cost of the build. And
I think her question was more, would there be contemplated a Camden Internet Development Corporation?
well, what I'm saying is a
I'm just wondering
feasibility
if,
study
is Camden
looks.
subsidizing is Camden, which towns, obviously there
So
are
to be
towns that are-
frank, absolutely, Camden and Rockland make it more feasible for towns like Thomaston and Rockport to build their networks because we're denser.
We're denser, so
Yeah. Is somebody going to be presenting the study to us, or?
Yes, so we'll ask, and Mark Willett from Axiom, I'll reach
Okay.
out to him about presenting the
I
study.
think that would be wise.
And I mean, I do think it's good, Matt has a lot of expertise and background in this, and I think there's some areas where, Matt and Mark are not in agreement, and I think it's very important that those are fleshed out as part of this discussion.
I agree. I absolutely agree that controversy or questions can be beneficial to the entire corporation, to lay them both on the table.
So bring the boxing gloves next week.
Very light ones, but that's fine.
Not light. No, Mark, bring. I have a pretty good right hook.
Okay, good.
Sorry, I just one more. What has Camden contributed so far in terms of?
15,000, I believe.
Oh, it's
You
20.
guys, it's 35,000 so far.
35. Yeah, we did in two
For the
chunks.
study.
Well, yes. Most of that money has been spent for the study, but not all of it.
Specifically, the contribution of Camden and the other core four were $15,000 to the Axiom study, and right now in the bank account from Camden still remains $18,917, I
20
believe,
left.
from the Camden contribution.
Right.
And now who has?
So again, 15,000 went to the Axiom study for our participation. Same with the other members, the core four. And then the other fees, Mark, went to things, we had some legal fees and such that were covered.
Yep.
So the other towns contributed the same amount, or?
So, yes, so each town contributed 15,000. Excuse me. And then we had two satellite communities who participated initially, and they were at $5,000 each.
Okay. And so the
A total of
remaining,
$70,000 for the study.
and what is the remaining 18,000 or whatever?
It's just sitting in the bank
What's that
account.
going to be used for?
It was sitting in the bank account, that's all, because the only thing.
Sitting in their bank account,
Yeah,
not ours. Okay.
yeah, their bank account, because we contributed to it as a development seed money, but there's two chunks. The chunk that we approved in the select board was to fund a certain amount of money to our portion of the feasibility study. We did that, and Matt outlined that perfectly. I think it was around 75,000 total, or whatever it was around that order of magnitude. And that's what the Axiom study is. That's what you'll see next week. There is funds still available to the Development Corporation in the tune of probably a total of around 40 years. Something. I forget the exact number. It's not huge.
This is a good thing. I mean, for years and years, Camden would always opt out of participating in the studies, and so we didn't have the information when people asked about it, and so it's a great thing that we're.
Yeah, and Allison, to your point, I mean, it's essential whether you agree or not with the findings, which you'll hear a little bit of come back to next week in terms of the findings. It's essential to move forward in terms of addressing either lending institutions or any of the state lending institutions or borrowing institutions in the state. One of the elements that you need in your little grocery bag of things is a feasibility study. And it needs to have 5-year performance.
Yep.
Again, whether you agree with them or don't agree with them, that's off to the side here, but that work needs to be done. And to the credit of the Development Corporation, that was done really fast and in a manner that will serve this project to move forward, as Bob says, in this critical 4 to 6 month period.
Yeah, and I also want to mention, I think, when did we formulate this corporation? Last June?
It came July. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody voted and approved it on June 8th of last year, and then
Right.
July 1st is when it came to be. And then we've been hustling ever since to start to work with the state, with the region, with the county, with Washington, D.C., and then with organizations like Axiom to create a feasibility study.
And I can say again, a phenomenal amount of work has been done in that 6 months or less. It's really impressive. But the challenge lies ahead. With that, go ahead, Matt, go ahead. Anything else?
No, again,
Oh, okay.
I was just going to say, I would like to, I think Mark put a motion out there.
And-
I just want to endorse the idea of an interim. I don't know how that's going to work for MIDC, but from my perspective, I think it makes sense.
I think Deborah understands it, and the other company. Sophie, you already seconded, didn't you, or not? Did somebody?
Somebody seconded, I don't know who, but let me.
Do I have a second?
I can
I'll second.
second.
Okay, Allison, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor here? 3. Mark?
Aye.
Matt?
Yes, thank you, Bob, for stepping up for the interim.
Yeah,
Much
that's,
appreciated.
you know what they say about pioneers, are the ones on the trail lying face down with arrows in their back. Let's move on.
They said to the Donner Party, too. I remember that.
Yeah, that's exactly what they said to him. So, thank you very much. In the discussion items, yep, and now we, item 4 on our agenda is a discussion item with respect to the Mcgunter River Restoration Study findings and related implementation process. Audra, would you lead
Yeah,
us
and
into
I
this?
really just want to keep it very simple tonight.
Okay.
So we've talked a lot about how time-consuming this project is and how unrealistic it is to not have an outside consultant working on it. I think we had hoped that our relationship with Midcoast Conservancy would fill that role. However, they had a change in leadership at the organization, and they wanted to take their focus away from looking at, regional river restoration projects back to their service area or service territory, which doesn't include areas like Camden. So, we need to find a consultant to work with to help us implement the findings of the feasibility study. So what I'm really asking for tonight is everybody's blessing to sort of begin that process of finding a consultant to work with to help us with that phase of the project.
I see. So basically, to go do some homework and try to find the best qualified or number of entities that are best qualified to make a decision about who may be the best person to have as your right arm.
Yeah, I mean, we really have a good model for this. We've done a number of studies recently, like with the sort of parking management study, finding a consultant with a lot of expertise in this area, and just, coming back to the board, getting approval for that. I do think that, one of the important parts of this process will be some sort of advisory group, similar to other major projects that we've done. However, when, we typically do these projects, we work with a consultant to identify the types of, people that are going to be part of that advisory group. So I think that that's also really important as part of this process.
I see.
So those are kind of, two things that I think are worth talking about, and, getting your blessing to move ahead with that. So I can come back to you with a recommendation.
Okay.
Are we going to do an RFP process or wider recruitment for the consultant, or?
I think this is so specialized that it's more of something that it would be good to go out and directly contact either firms or individuals who have done similar projects, and, get proposals from them to bring back and choose someone.
More of a market pull than an RFP.
Okay.
And I mean, and that was similar to, there have been a few sort of specialized projects that we've done where it's been similar. We haven't put out an RFP. We've actually approached people with specific expertise in that area.
Well, we know a number of people who've been involved in these kind of projects in the state of Maine, and I'm sure they have recommendations and of best qualified.
Yeah, and I mean, I was reading about another municipality recently. I think they were somewhere in central Maine who chose a consultant recently for the exact same thing for their watershed.
I see. Allison, you had your hand up.
When you say implementation of the findings, what do you mean by that? I wonder, I don't want people to think that we're just like, okay, there are all these recommendations, and we're just going to try to ram it through. I mean, what does that look like, and how?
Well, I think that, the recommendations are fairly broad. It's for the whole entirety of the watershed. Well, not the entire watershed, because, that goes into Hope and Lincolnville as well. But certainly all the portions of the watershed that are in the town of Camden that involve particularly the river system. So I think there's a lot of minutia in how that gets done, how it's sequenced, what are the areas of focus that, we really need somebody helping us out with for that. And I think that it's kind of, working with that consultant and with that group of people to kind of come up with more specific recommendations that would have to come back to the select board and then ultimately the voters for approval.
I think it's smart. I think we should do it, because then we can see progress, we can move along, and,
Yeah,
and we can outline a process.
And we can continue to do a job of defining that process better, so everybody can understand where this is the intent of where we're going, how we're going to do it, because it's complicated.
And how it's going to be paid for.
Yeah.
That too. But also we're had a lot of obvious questions about the next steps kind of thing, and it's logical because this is a major task.
Absolutely, and I think a big part of this is, me working with the consultant to put together a time frame and milestones.
Yep. Yes.
So that everybody has a clear understanding of, what we're working towards.
Yes.
When different components are going to come back to, the advisory group for a decision, then the select board, and then, public hearings and votes.
Right.
Amongst.
They can see those. They can see those items in this timeline.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge influx of funding right now with the infrastructure bill and climate change funding, and if we don't, obviously the town doesn't have enough bandwidth to
do it.
Or the select board. I mean, quite frankly, with all the stuff going on, I would love to have this topic on the agenda every single meeting so we could talk about different aspects of, the sediment or this dam or that dam, but it's pretty and I think there are other people in the community that have a lot of interest in being able to talk about it in different forums, but it's not going to be realistic, I think, for the select board to do everything. And so, or for, all of it to go through us. And so having another group, I think, would be good, but then making sure that we have the staffing that is just beyond obviously what we have here. We keep getting really slowed down by not this visual aspect, or somebody that can be really responsive to understanding, okay, these are the questions that the community has. Let's sketch something. So it'd be nice to.
You're asking for, do we vote on this?
No.
No.
There's nothing to, well, what she's really saying is you're just looking for a direction. And the direction is basically to investigate this consultant and the consultant's role and how it plays with the possible development of a task force. And that's all. Just say, yeah. The worst thing we would want to do is to have Audra and company go spend time investigating. The select person said, well, why are you doing that for?
Right, yeah, I didn't want to, start down this road unless I knew that the board was supportive of it.
Totally. Well,
Yeah, 'cause
I mean, this is going to be something that will cost money, though, is the thing. I think there is a lot of grant funding available to do
Yes.
a lot of the other stuff we've done. We have big studies with lots of information.
And we do have funding available. There was money that, we were going to pay Midcoast Conservancy that was returned to us because they couldn't take on the project. So
Right.
we do have available
Some
funding.
funds, yeah.
but I think
I'm not saying
No,
it's
I mean,
going
I
to
think
cover
it's
everything.
okay. It's just, I think there's a level of community interest that demands more engagement and more,
Yep.
and that's going to cost some money. And I think what we have heard some is that not everything needs to be free. It's better to do,
Yeah,
a
paid.
complete job of it. So,
it's complicated, it's technical, we need expert information and input on this, and none of us have it at the board. We may be super interested, but we're not experts, so.
And I guess just to throw this out there for consideration by the board, because we are kind of coming into budget season, we will be talking about some of these things. So the Treasury released their final guidance on the use of ARPA funds. That's the direct payments from the federal government
Yes.
that were, via the state to the municipalities. Camden's going to receive about $500,000. So green infrastructure projects, stormwater projects, those are now eligible expenses. So, a project like this where we're, doing a study that looks at best practices in, resiliency planning and green infrastructure, because that was all, if you recall some of the outcomes of the study, those were all components of it. So I would say that might be something that you want to consider as part of the budget cycle.
Right.
right. I mean, some of this is not even, there's the Montgomery Dam, which really has a lot of interest and is sort of more controversial in terms of design, but there are huge aspects of the study that are really not that sort of category of item. It's just, how can we figure out how to make the Riverwalk work past the middle school, and is there a beneficial reuse to some of this sediment? Or
acknowledging that,
fixing
the
a
river
culvert.
is our biggest piece of stormwater infrastructure in the town. And so how do we sort of manage that in certain ways that it's going to lead to better outcomes for homeowners?
Right. Or getting to the point where we can do year-round water quality monitoring, which is something that people have asked for a long time.
Well, I'm not hearing anything on the negative side, Audra, so if, notwithstanding that, it sounds like you...
It would be nice to have some sort of verbal confirmation that Matt and Mark are on the same page as the rest of you.
Matt and Mark, did you hear all this? Matt?
Yes.
Thank you, Audra. Yes. I'm a big fan of actually getting it on the record that we were discussing this and approving it. So I'm with you, Audra.
I think it's always essential that we get experts to help us in situations where we're not so personally knowledgeable.
Right.
And I think having the citizens committee as well, so that, we get input from the community as well. So it's not just us is important also.
All right,
I want
Audra.
to see if anybody.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to make a comment here or not, but I'm hearing the positive side of this, Audra, so I think you have a go from that perspective, but if anybody wants to say anything, you're more than welcome, but please. Would you please identify yourself?
Bernice Berger, Camden. I guess I still feel like there's a lot of questions out there. And we have, before you go and spend all this time and energy and money, our money, you really need to get public input to see if this is something that the citizens would even buy into. You're putting a lot of time and energy into something that many people have investigated. And there are those of us who say, this can't happen. So how can we, as a town, before you go and put all this time and energy into the river restoration, and you're saying that there will be a citizen committee of some sort?
She mentioned a task force, potentially a task force, potentially. Remember, what she's really saying is we're looking for some expertise from a specialty consultant to look at some of these matters for the town, to put the flesh on the bone, so that we can bring information to the table for us and eventually the voters to make a logical decision, which is what we do on every single initiative in the town.
And like I said, we need to look at this as stormwater management as well. That's really important, regardless of how you feel about any of the dams.
Yeah.
We are going to have we already have a stormwater management problem. It's only going to get worse. We can't ignore this. We can't just pretend this feasibility study doesn't exist and turn a blind eye to it because it's controversial. That's just not an option for us. So we need to address this in some manner. And it really doesn't matter if the public is not supportive of it at this point, because we have to do something. It's a critical issue.
Of course you do.
So, I mean, I'm just saying that we need to start somewhere. We can't bring every single aspect of this to voters for approval to make sure that we have overwhelming support of it.
How
we need
can
to
the
sort of break
voters-
it down in a way that...
And the voters ask questions and get answers.
Bernice, you have not asked me one question. It's as simple as sending an email. Send me an email. I'll get you answers.
Okay. There are a lot of questions to be asked.
Send emails. You can email
But
us.
it just seems like, so you tell me, who am I telling? You're only telling me. It seems like these facts and this information should go to a greater audience than
And it
just
has.
me.
We've spent a lot of effort in trying to get out information in the only ways that we can, which is through websites, meetings, newspaper articles. I mean, I really don't know what else to do, and that's one of the reasons why I'm asking for help of a consultant.
And that's why we're here, to try to understand. It's almost like the cart before the horse, or the big picture. There's a lot going on out here.
Sure.
A lot of energy.
Absolutely. And every initiative we do in the town is exactly what it is. And we can't expect to, we're having a very difficult time on any issue to get information to the public. It's just complicated these days.
But I would say that we are a town meeting form of government. We do the best we can to get information out there. I'm not a marketing expert, and I don't believe it's my job to market projects to people. It's my job to communicate what the information is. We've got certain ways that we can do that. I'm not saying we always do it perfectly. We try our best, but people have a major responsibility to go out and seek that information if you're going to be directly involved or voting on issues. That's just how we are set up.
So coming to these meetings
Absolutely.
is the best way so far, rather than a forum of answering questions?
I would say that we've had forums and we'll continue to have them, but I think that absolutely reaching out, we have never refused to answer a question. I really haven't received a lot of emails with questions directly asked about this project. I've put out as much information as I can as soon as I get it, and that's very publicly available. And we try to make sure it's posted in multiple locations so people can see it. I do think a big part of having a consultant on board is helping us with the public engagement and preparing information, distributing it. Because like I said, I'm not an expert on how to market or communicate this material. I do my very best. And I think that's the same with the select board, but.
Nothing we do that's not open to the public.
I think a lot of this is about also trying to use the community as a resource and figuring out the best way to do that, because there are a lot of things that we do all agree on. I think all of us want to tell the story of the, industrial heritage of our town better. I think we'd all like to be able to go and learn a little bit about the history of the Montgomery Dam. We'd all, probably like some of the sediment to be removed and for it to look a little bit better during the times it does have to be open. And so figuring out, having somebody go and figure out, okay, are there things that the community just basically agrees on right now that could be implemented? Could we delay the decision about how a design would look for the Montgomery Dam, and could we agree on sediment removal or something? Or
How do you find that out?
I think that I think that we're trying to get more expertise on how the staging of this could go. How do you best communicate options to the public? It doesn't seem to be with just like throwing out a 250-page report, because that it's, do you need to have a 5-page version,
Perhaps.
whatever,
Perhaps.
somebody that goes around and talks individually with all of the property owners. I don't know if that's part of it or not, but I think that we're not that, it's too big for the town to do really well in terms of getting all the information. And what we do mostly is we put, the opportunity for the public to come here and say, we don't want you to look at this issue more. It was on an agenda to apply for funding for the National Coastal Resilience Fund. And the select board said to do it, and the public can always come and say, you shouldn't be looking at this issue at all. Just like tonight, people can come and say, what's wrong with you guys thinking about starting an internet development corporation? You're doing, how the process works for the most part.
I think we're getting better at it now. I think we are getting better at getting the word out of what's coming up, what's ahead.
It's tough when you don't know if there's something to look out there. Do I look at every single planning board agenda?
Right.
No. And am I going to commit to doing that for the rest of my life? I probably can't. It's, it's understandable when people come in and they're like, I didn't know this was going on.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
I did that with the middle school, for instance. I was like, and then when I look back, well, they had put out things before. But I do think we want to try to do it better and do it well and move forward where we can agree and at least understand. I think sometimes we don't even know where we disagree, like what the exact disagreements are.
Exactly.
So if
That's
we could
what I'm
define
saying.
those.
It just seems like we're coming at it from different angles. How do you get on the same page that we all hear the same thing?
And fundamentally, what's going to come next will be Audra bringing back to us a recommendation on what this potential consultant can do and how they will do it in a program for the select board
What
to
sort of
approve.
timeline are we thinking about there?
For the consultant? Mm-hmm. I would like to have, options for you or a recommendation for you within a month's time.
So the second meeting in February.
Yeah, I think that, there's a chance it could be done sooner, and I'd like to do it as soon as possible because.
That's only 3 weeks away for the next one. And February 1st, I think, is our next, after next Tuesdays, February 1st is our.
And these are folks from inland, Maura? Is that what you were talking about earlier?
No, I was just giving an example of another municipality that did something similar to what we're talking about doing now, but.
Utilization of a
There's a
consultant.
chance we won't find a
Yeah,
consulting
you got to
firm
be
that
careful. You got to be a little careful
I think the hope
because
is that
these
we can
consultants are not,
somebody.
most people today are not sitting on their thumbs. They're very busy and
Yeah.
ask any contractor.
Especially with projects like this, because there is so much funding available to do this kind of work.
Yes. Yes, so it's crucial that we get on the road to find out whether there are options for us to consider.
I mean, even looking at things like the Rawson Avenue Bridge, before we go and like mess up that and make it so kayakers can't get underneath it, or there's a lot going on in town that sort of relates, but
Yep.
that we might need some help with.
I think it's great.
All right. Thank you, Bernice. Good to see you. Anybody else want to chat to it?
Hi, my name's Roger Akeley from Camden. And I was just wondering, are you going to have an RFP? Is that the way you'll get the consultant?
I was just saying, I don't want to do an RFP process because this is fairly specialized. So I'd rather directly approach, a few contractors with, specifications of exactly what we want to
How is the
do.
interface between the interfluve report, for example, and this contractor? Do you give them the interfluve report? Of course, they'll look at that as background information and say, we want you to pursue recommendation number 3, which is get rid of the Montgomery Dam.
We'd look at the whole,
Whoops.
look at the whole report because it's holistic and it looks at the entire watershed.
Okay.
And, they're going to, I'm hoping that they'll give us recommendations on an advisory group to work with. And then the consultant in that advisory group will look at sort of each piece of the report in each area and sort of give recommendations on, staging of different aspects of the project and, opportunities for things like, funding that might be available, specific items that they might be recommending that are a little more detailed than just what's in the interfluve.
So theoretically, there are 5 consultants in Maine that would do a good job. How do you, if you're not going to do an RFP, how do you ask them for the same thing?
I'm just not going to send out a broad brush request for proposals, but I'll write something up that's it'll be a scope.
A scope of work, right.
Exactly. And then they'll respond to it with proposals.
Okay. And say there are 2 out of the 5 you really like, but the proposals are a little different. So if you wrote up a contract, say, with number 1, and you wrote up one with number 3, they would theoretically be different contracts and based on what they proposed to you.
Well,
I mean, that's okay. I just want to
yeah, I mean,
get an understanding.
I think there's a number of things that are going to be really important that, some are going, by virtue of their background and expertise, are going to be better at than others. So, I don't think, the engineering aspect of this is less important, in my opinion, than like the project management and the public communication side of all of this. So I think that there are, differences, and people are going to have expertise in this area that's going to come out as part of, writing up the scope of work and then interviewing the different consultants.
Could choose a couple of them to do different parts of it too, I suppose. Yeah.
No,
I mean, my hope is that we're
can
going to
find
be
one, yeah.
that maybe there'll be a couple firms that will be able to come and say, having looked at the studies that you guys have already done, this is what we would recommend, this is what we can offer you, and that we're going to hear some things or see some things written that are going to be like, oh, wow, that seems like it would be good. Or we're going to say, you know what, it looks like you didn't include enough, I think there's a lot of interest in more interface with the community. And they could say, well, we don't really do that, but, X, Y, or Z group does that. I don't know if it may turn out that we talk to a couple and they say, yeah, that's really more than we can bite off right now, and we're going to have to come back and say, put out some kind of an RFP. But, I mean, hopefully they're going to be able to tell us, this is what we've seen work for a community in the past. These are some of the next steps.
With the stormwater ones, do you have specific things in mind that have been identified that you want them to do more engineering on, or?
Yes.
Okay, for that part of it.
Absolutely.
And then the trail was mentioned earlier. Is the trail something that would be added onto this, or not necessarily? Depends on the, I don't know, you were talking about the trail at some point. Is that part of a kind of study like this, or would that happen separately?
So the pathways, there's a Riverwalk master plan that sort of basically lays out where the hope is that the Riverwalk will go. Some of that has changed, and some of it may need to change, but there are places where they've encountered problems because of wetlands or setbacks. And so dovetailing that with a grant, like say for the Knowlton Street Dam,
Yeah.
a lot of that is impacted by sediment removal or not removing the sediment. If there's an opportunity to say, oh, we can combine that with a trails grant, we can use some of the sediment to do X, Y, or Z, we can bring the cost down. It's sort of all of that work that might need to be done.
Yeah, there's a lot of, aside from just the feasibility study by Interfluve, there's a lot of other, work that's been done, like the Riverwalk Master Plan. We have different stormwater studies. We've got engineering reports on specific dams, typically the
Historical
ones.
signage
You've
stuff.
got a lot of work to do in a month, so corral all that.
Right. But I mean, that's why it's so important to have someone else doing this, because it's not necessarily just about the feasibility study. That's, I think, the backbone of it all. But there's a lot of sort of ancillary related projects that, are part of this that need to be considered, when we're looking at the entire watershed and what the, aspirations are for it.
Even the public landing,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or, Tony?
Tony Grassi from Camden. I think this is a great idea. I think this is a huge project. It's the most important thing that Camden has on its plate, I think, for the next 10 years. And it needs to be done right, and you need professional help, and you five don't have the time. You're trying to run the town. Audra can't do it. I think you need real professional expertise to help you. I'm with you, Allison. If this means spending real cash money, I'd spend real cash money on it. Get it right. Don't try to sort of get it from somebody pro bono, free, because it won't be as thorough and as complete. And I think the public education is a huge piece of it. And I would hope the other thing you would do is ask the consultants for a recommended timeline, because you've got the Main Street Bridge coming. You got to get your sequencing right for all that. And it seems to me you're headed for this. Sort of the ideal time would be to have a vote in November, having gone through all the public hearings and information sessions, and that gives you sort of 6 or 8 months for the consultant to get their mind around this thing and to really engage the public, and let all the voices be heard and be educated, and then hopefully people will do their homework and they'll read materials and so forth. I think that's sort of, in the long run, that's the best interest of the town. And so I'm thoroughly supportive of this as an approach.
Thanks, Tony. Thank you very much. All right, Audra, I guess you have the marching orders, so we'll be looking forward to February, some activity in this regard. Thank you. On to our reports. Do you have any town manager reports, Audra, you'd like to lay on the table?
I am going to save that for when we meet next week.
Select board reports, Mark.
I don't have much. I just want to mention that I'm always coming into Audra's office and keeping track of how the Snowball is doing. Obviously, we've had tremendous challenges with snowmaking because of the weather, but I believe they're almost close to opening up the triple, which would be great. And I think they're doing an amazing job. It's a very cold day, and I know the snowmakers are working today. And, we're close to getting the tubing hill open. So thanks to Beth for making all the changes and working all that. But, I think it's going to be another good year, knock on wood that the weather continues. But the Snowball is something special for our town, and everybody spends a lot of time, thinking about it, talking about it, looking at it. And I try to make sure that everybody understands that we're all paying attention and doing the best we can to make sure it's the best service to the town that we can do. And Audrey knows I ask her about it all the time when I'm in the office, as I did this morning. And she's always on top of it, and so is Beth, so I appreciate the help.
Thanks, Mark. Matt?
In the theme of communications, just trying to figure out, I think moving forward, the idea of really sitting down, I don't think it's not necessarily a workshop, but somehow figuring out in terms of communications, as Audra is very forthcoming saying, I am not the marketing, I am not the goddess of all things marketing. I do really a lot of great work, but, how do we start to take this on? And specifically, simple things like press releases and updates, the fact that there are now boards and committees that have been reignited and brought back to life. And I was just caught in Hannaford's this week, yelled at by some lady who I've never met, saying, why are there no boards and committees? You guys are terrible. We should fire you all. So again, in keeping with that, that would be a simple one to start with, perhaps. I don't know the answer, Bob. I don't know the answer, Audra. But at some point in the really near future, we should address this whole idea of communication. Perhaps we start with the idea that we press releases for things like the committees are back, and there are now representatives to them. Again, just something that we should look at in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Allison?
Oh, well, the committees, many of them have continued to meet, and you will never escape being yelled at Hannaford, just to put that out there. So just be at peace with it, and it's one of the best parts of the
Like I said, you can
job.
always borrow my kids if you want to go shopping and get out of there fast.
But, no, I agree.
At least I could, Allison, maybe if I could say, what, we have this, I don't know, some press release section of the webpage where, after every meeting, there's, I don't know. I don't have an answer right now. And I am getting better, just so you know, Allison, at smiling when people yell at me at the Hannafords. I am getting much better.
Good.
It's actually, it's
Good.
I don't know. I get a lot of interesting input there, but I agree that we could do better. We can always do better. Figuring out how to do all of that is a work in progress. I think Camden is, is it at the level where it's, a city kind of type environment where people expect that level of, regular newsletters going out. And I think for years, Camden has sort of resisted that idea. We're like the small town that stays the small town. It isn't the city and doesn't have that level of staffing. And,
To do it, yeah.
but, people tend to have a lot of appetite for it, and the newspaper seems to have a more and more limited bandwidth. I got sort of frustrated, and that's why I just write something every week about the town and say it's my own personal opinion. But I do think that the people in town have a lot of desires to do things and talk about things and use the town as sort of a means of social engagement. And that if we want to continue that, we need more staffing, and it's going to cost people a lot more money. Anyway, on a related note with town committees, I just want to had an emotional week because my mom passed away unexpectedly. But before that, I was really sad about a longtime town committee member, Mark Haskell, who I really, really came to enjoy and respect and appreciate. He died also unexpectedly, peacefully in his sleep. I think it was Christmas Eve. And, Mark is one of these people that has been, he would come to almost every meeting, and he was almost never here for a specific agenda item. Maybe he would have, a little something to add, but it would almost never be directly related to anything of personal interest to him, really. It was, a concern over the Midcoast solid waste, the yellow bags, or it was the unfairness of the fee structure or lack of fee structure. For
Hated that Maine didn't have open primaries.
ball fields. He famously spent about $20,000 of his own money contesting the constitutionality of banning jet skis from lakes. And, at the time I thought, jet skis, who wants jet skis on lakes? But his argument for doing it, I was really, actually really well developed, and he did it. He intentionally violated the law there so that he could challenge its constitutionality, because he felt that keeping people safe on lakes was a matter of regulating behavior and not the type of boat. And he liked that civil disobedience thing. He withheld, remember the year he withheld part of his taxes based on the ball field situation? And
He tried.
I don't know how that was resolved, but he did succeed. And there aren't that many people like Mark left sometimes. It feels people that have been paying attention for long enough to realize that it doesn't usually come down to like one issue or being on this side or that side of something, that you're going to end up being on all sides of the table with different people. And he never held grudges, and you could really disagree with him on something, and he could be just as pleasant as can be throughout. And he changed his mind when he found new information. And I found that even though I don't think we probably ever voted for the same person for president, there were so many times when he provided context or perspective on a town issue that, just really turned out to be valuable. And I'm really going to miss him. And he did a lot for the town. So
I would agree with you wholeheartedly. Everything you just said about Mark, I'll miss him too. I never very rarely agreed with him, but I always enjoyed him.
Yeah, I served with him on the budget committee, and he supported my bid when I decided to run. And he didn't know me very well, because the only thing.
He's a great guy.
Great guy,
We'll
always
miss him.
kind. So, and I didn't know he passed away. So thanks.
Ms. Sophie.
I just had one thing to say. It's a little shout out to Dave Saint Laurent, who helped me resolve an issue that the plow created, because the ground was not frozen yet. And that's, I'm new to Maine. So I was educated in the sense that you need to have a frozen ground for the plow to effectively plow the snow without destroying the land underneath it. So
you didn't freeze your ground ahead of time.
I didn't freeze my ground ahead of time. Now I know, but Dave Saint was super nice in helping me resolve an issue with one of our neighbors, and very nice in educating me. So again, this is a shout out to the quality of the people we work with at the town, and how fast
I agree with you.
they answer some of our demands, and they try to as much as possible. So thank you, Dave.
Thank you. I already mentioned it. I was going to mention the Midcoast Internet Development Corporation approval of the marketing program thing, which we'll attack next time, or we'll see now that it's out. But anyway, with that, I'd like a motion to leave select board meeting and adjourn under executive session MRSA 4056E, legal rights and responsibilities.
I think Marcus is.
So moved.
Second.
Did you ask Matt about his report?
Yes. Were you paying attention? Yes. He didn't have anything. Yep. And I had a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Second. All those in favor? Mark?
Aye.
Matt?
Was Mark in favor?
Yes. Good job. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break while we get ready to move into executive session. I try to find my car keys.
Your car keys.
Oh no, did you lose them?